Hi there. So my name's John LeDrew. Let's see if this works. Hooray! So I've been an Agile coach, software engineer, kind of technical consultant for about 17 years, doing various mixes of those three things over that time. I also recently started this podcast called The Agile Path, which is largely what this talk is kind of about, really, or certainly the content of what became the first episode and some of my journey and kind of learning up to that. So what did I do? So last October, started in Scotland, funnily enough. So last October, I had an idea for a podcast. I wanted to do a podcast. For those of you that have heard it, you'll know that it's somewhat certainly creatively different maybe from some of the other podcasts that are out there, but that was pretty much the only thing that I knew that was certain about this. All I really knew is I wanted to communicate some of the messages around Agile in a different way to the way that a lot of the other podcasts in the space have been doing. And that was it. I really didn't know what I wanted to talk about or what the subject was going to be or what I was going to cover. So I wandered up to Lean Agile Scotland, as it happened. I didn't expect to get a ticket. A ticket came up at the last minute and I managed to do it in a day. Jumped on a train from Manchester, arrived at 9 o'clock, very bleary-eyed, and had lots of great conversations with people. And it turned out that safety was this thing that everyone was talking about but not talking about. So people would kind of almost every talk, almost everything that was spoken about, every talk that I saw, every conversation I had, this idea of whether or not the team was safe was sort of in there somewhere, or they were talking about what I'd say is a symptom of that, a symptom of unsafety perhaps. So it was there everywhere, but no one really knew what it was. And by the end of the day, I'd be asking people, well, so what is this safety? What does it actually mean? And it's almost like, it was almost like this mysterious, enigmatic thing that seemed simultaneously essential to everything. So it was like, I think recently I described it's almost like dark matter or dark energy. No one really knows anything about it, but all we know is it's holding everything together. So I kind of thought, I went away and I thought, yeah, this is going to be great. It seems like safety, this is a great topic. It's going to be fine. Nice kind of succinct first episode, awesome, all packaged up. I put some feelers out and said, hey people, do you want to talk to me about safety? I basically went down my bookshelf pretty much, and I expected no one to say yes. But Agilists are really generous. Everyone said yes, pretty much, and I managed to speak to some, really fantastic people. But I ended up with 60 hours odd of audio, 38 hours, 38 odd interviews. I mean, and counting. There's still one or two still happening. So I ended up with all of this audio, and I started to dig into the research. So I had a lot of opinions. So where that led me to initially was a thing called Google's Project Aristotle. Who's heard of Project Aristotle? I'm sure a few. There's always one or two hands. So Project Aristotle was Google's effort to try and work out what made a great team at Google. So they knew that they had teams, and they knew some of their teams were very effective and some of their teams were less effective. And they wanted to empirically verify what was an effective team, what was effective versus not, what made, what was the magic sauce that was happening here, why was one team better than another. And they were based on this idea, this quote from, very well-known quote from Aristotle, which is that it's very easy to assume when you say what makes team A better than team B is obviously team A has better people than team B. Team B just has crappy people, team A has really good people, But it's not that. I'll give it that away. So let's just look at initially, one of the first things they needed to work out was what a team actually is. And this is an interesting thing I found. So what they decided, and there's this nice definition of the difference between a work group and a team. So what when you think of a work group, this is something defined by an organizational and managerial hierarchy. So it could be a team with a team lead or a project manager or some sort of clear kind of central point of authority. And they occasionally, it's described as work groups, may meet periodically to hear and share information. Here, daily stand up there, I think, in many, many Scrum teams and Agile teams. A team, on the other hand, works together to plan, work, solve problems, make decisions and review progress. Team members need one another to get work done. There is interdependency between the team members. And that means that you have a team of people and you rely upon that team. This is not a lack of resilience in the team. This is not, we need John to be in because otherwise we won't know how that bit of the system works. It's not, the bus syndrome. It's everyone needing the team to be a team. We need the team to be there for us to get our work done. It's not that, a team of 5 becomes a team of 4 and they won't be able to deliver anymore. It's more that for them to be effective, they require all of the parts of that team. There is an interdependency. So, out of interest, I did a quick Twitter survey, which was not in any way scientific, and there was a lot of goading from the mob programming group to try and get the mobbing bit up towards the end of the survey. So, out of interest, could you raise your hand if on a day-to-day basis in an 8-hour period at work, most of the time, you work with more than 2 people, collaborate with more than 2 people, so actively working together on a team of more than you and someone else? Wow, that's awesome. All right, so Scotland clearly owns the mob programming or collaboration group. So I'm talking about actively being and working with more than one person at the same time for most of the 8-hour day. Wicked. All right, some actual collaboration. What about pairing? So you're working with at least one other person for most of the day, the majority of the day. So that's and then so everyone else, are you on your own for 8 hours a day? Mostly, occasionally meeting people for coffee, hopefully, or maybe it doesn't count, by the way, if you're just talking to the person opposite you on Slack. I'm just saying that's not actually collaboration either. Okay, so yeah, what does make a team great? Now we know what a team is, and that almost none of you are in teams, it seems. I'm just saying. What actually makes one great? So let's go in reverse order. Google found 5 points. I'm going to go take them down. So the first point that they found in all of the teams is that team members, the teams that were doing great, the team members think that their work matters and that makes change in what they're doing. So this is just them recognizing that what they're doing actually matters in the organization, actually seeing their stuff go live. This could be as simple as if I was to join Facebook tomorrow as a junior engineer, without any experience, that on my first day I will push something up live. It might just be a CSS change. Interestingly, it often is just a styling change. There's a reason why it's a styling change, because it means that individual sees something visual change right in front of them that they've actually seen done. It might just be, make that bit of text bold in a thing, but it's on Facebook and 1 billion people have seen it. I've made an impact with that, one bold word. And that's both at an individual level and at a team level. They want to be able to see those changes. You need to know, otherwise, well, what are we doing, Related to that is the chaos study. I think it's the chaos study. I might be mistaking 2 related studies, but who's heard the stat 45% of features delivered are never used? And a few people might have heard that stat before. So that's not just like some backup feature that's only used once a year to back things up. That's 45% of software and features delivered in software are never ever used. Customers don't even know what the hell they are. They've never heard of them. They don't know they have them on their machine. So if you think about the possible waste, or think about the fact that means 1 in 2 things that most teams are working on are never seen by their customer, and then wonder how that might affect their impression of the impact that they have on the work that they're doing. So this means that the work is personally important to the individual team members, so they care about it. Now, this does not mean that the team members are that you have to be working for a charity, or something. You have to be, allowing children to eat in Africa, or making sure that there are less homeless people on the street. That's not what it means. It does not mean that there has to be this kind of goodness or whatever to what you're doing. Some people confuse that. It's like, hey, I work for, a gambling company, or, or whatever. I work for the MOD. How do I find meaning in what I'm doing? I don't, I'm a pacifist, and I work for the MOD. Or whatever it might be. I mean, there's probably you're gonna have conflicts there anyway, aren't you? But but still, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as far as that. It's about the team actually just finding value in what they're doing. A lot of the time, when I've seen anyway, where teams are perhaps less able to engage in the external value in what they're doing, or the sort of value to society of what they're doing, they tend to care about the quality of what they're doing. That's what the focus becomes. They really want to do a good job. They don't necessarily, they can't necessarily engage with the kind of commercial value, but they can see the quality. So team members, structure and clarity. Team members need to know what they're doing. They just need to know what the hell they're doing. So this is surprisingly can be kind of comically proven by a simple exercise. If you get your team, give them all a post-it note and get them to anonymously write down what the goal of the current sprint or iteration or project is, and see how much alignment you have between team members. I mean, they might align. I've seen the greatest alignment was just everyone wrote a question mark. They all agreed that they really didn't know. This is a really big issue for many projects. I think actually meaning kind of feeds directly into this in some respects, because a lot of the time when leadership aren't actually communicating the value of the work that they're doing effectively down the chain, then by the time you get to sort of individual team members knowing what it is they're doing, that it's just, I'm just doing this so that manager over there doesn't shout at me. I'm doing this so I get paid. That doesn't actually work, unfortunately. Just working so you get paid doesn't actually tie into our kind of theory of motivation. If anyone's read Drive, I assume a lot of people have. Read Drive by Dan Pink. It's a great book, but when we talk about intrinsic motivation, meaning and structure and clarity, they kind of they play into each other quite a bit. And the idea that an individual might be kind of just happy with the idea that they get paid for what they do is surprisingly not the motivation for many individuals. Dependability. So we spoke about this. This is pretty obvious. So a good team actually does stuff. That's pretty important. You can depend on a team to actually do the things that they promise to do. This is almost like trust at a team level to some degree. So this is the external view of that team's ability to deliver. And psychological safety. So psychological safety is team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of one another. We spoke about vulnerability a little bit earlier. So one of the key things, and we'll obviously dive more into this is the facet of team effectiveness that we're going to be looking into. One of the important factors here is this isn't just sort of number one, in the list. What they found is that this is actually utterly critical. So whereas all of the other elements could be found in varying levels across different teams that were effective, where there wasn't psychological safety, you didn't have any of the others. You didn't have anything else. You lacked clarity, you lacked structure. A lot of the other things didn't exist when safety wasn't there. Okay, so why is it essential? Safety is essential because we are all inherently reluctant to do anything which might compromise what we perceive to be others' perception of our competence, awareness, or positivity. So what are those three things? So competence is pretty obvious. This is, I don't want other people to think I can't do my job, what I'm here to do. So this could be a situation like being, I need to be able to, the team wants to use a new testing framework that I've never used before. And I just go, I've never used that before actually. Could maybe someone sit down and go through it with me? And there's a couple of possible outcomes that could come from that. They could look over and go, you've never used it? Well, it's been out for like 5 years. And I go, oh, it's all right, I'll just look at the docs. It's fine, I'll be all right. Or they go, yeah, sure, why don't we pair? Well, one of those is a safe engagement and one of those isn't. Awareness is kind of links back to structure and clarity, but it's where individuals might express a question about the direction of the project or what we're doing or what the goal is, and people shoot them down about, well, of course you should know what we're doing. This often comes from managers and the individuals responsible for setting that structure and clarity, shooting down individual team members that have asked what it is. It's on the board. There's the goal right there. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't really understand how it's actually relevant to this sprint. We're just increasing the value of the product or whatever it might be. I'm working on a color selector. How does that link up? Whatever it might be. There's often an incongruence there. And positivity. This is an interesting one. So this is the team member that is the naysayer. So this is the guy, can you imagine the person on the team that's sort of kind of grumbling a bit? This isn't really working. Oh God. Or whenever they sit there, you can just kind of hear them kind of like, oh, this is bullshit, isn't it? Oh God, why are we doing this? This is never going to work, guys. I mean, can't you see, I don't see how we're ever going to deliver by this deadline. Why are we even bothering? And what's interesting is that there is definitely a very negative side to that kind of attitude. And unfortunately, that is clearly often a symptom of burnout and other much later kind of stage problems with individuals' engagement on a project. But actually, being able to say openly and honestly, I think this is a bad idea, and there's a risk here, and raising risks is important. It's critical, in fact, for a project. Is anyone here traditional project management background? Perhaps. So has anyone from a traditional project management background ever in their whole careers had a situation where perhaps a risk that was quite important was perhaps reported a little bit later than you might have liked? I think almost all of them in a way, but often quite a bit later than maybe when you actually look into it than they were known about. And there's a reason for that. A lot of the time people don't feel comfortable reporting risks and problems because they don't want to be the person that, that raised the flag and said that there's a big problem here. So back in 1999, Amy Edmondson published a paper where she defines psychological safety. Now she describes it as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. I think that plays into the previous description, the sort of summarized description, quite neatly. But what I found interesting was that I had an immediate reaction to these words, punished and humiliated. I just felt that seemed a bit extreme. I've never ever worked in an environment. I've worked in unsafe environments, so I've never worked in an environment where, the manager sent me into the store cupboard for half an hour because I'd been bad. Maybe some people have, but I hadn't. And I don't think I'd ever experienced what I would call humiliation in the bullying on the playground sense. I know definitely bullying is an issue, but that's a very separate problem to the general interactions of a team. And it just seemed like this seems very extreme because actually psychological safety isn't really in that space. Sure, absolutely. If you've got genuine bullying in your environment or a manager that locks people in the cupboards, you definitely don't have psychological safety. There's enough said on that. But you probably have to get through a whole heap of other potential problems before you would even need to address safety. So this seemed like an interesting problem because I was just like, it just seems like strong words until I recognized that actually this is a personal experience thing. This is describing how an individual feels when these things happen to them, not how it might be perceived externally. So what I mean by that is if you recognize that your manager has perhaps overlooked you for that pay rise that you were hoping for because you failed to deliver something. And they've decided that you were personally responsible for that, you know, regardless of you being on an agile team and everything. They decided it was your fault. You're going to feel punished, okay? And you might as well be locked in the store cupboard for half an hour. If that team member that that pointed out that I really should have known how to use that testing framework or whatever it might be, says that in front of the team, I'm going to feel humiliated by that situation. That's going to hurt. You know, it would hurt most people. And actually, those sorts of subtle engagements happen quite frequently, and I don't think people recognize the balance and the effect that those things might have on individuals on the team. Okay, so, yeah, now we're going to do some interesting things that you probably haven't done before. So, improvisation. Put your hands up if you know what improvisation is. Most people do. Has anyone seen it? Has anyone been to an improv show before? Has anyone done improv before? Anyone? All right, good. I'm glad that no one has. Okay, so improvisation is something that is improvised, in particular a piece of music, drama, and it's created spontaneously without any preparation. I'm going to skip that slide. Should have got rid of that one. So the core of improvisation is this idea called yes and. So for those that listen to the podcast, you hear a wonderful individual called Phelan McDermott, who's a fantastic improviser, but he's been doing improv for about 20 years. He's a fantastic theatre director. And he talks about yes and as being the yes and muscle. Okay, so what this means is when someone presents me with an idea in an improv scene, so if you can imagine, improv is a bunch of actors or performers or individuals with no acting experience or knowledge whatsoever stood up on the stage, and when someone comes up with an idea, you accept that idea. It doesn't matter how crazy it is, how weird it is, how off the wall it seems. You just go, yeah, all right, I'll go with that. I'll see what, I can say yes to that idea, that offer. And the and portion is I'm going to work on that. I'm going to say, okay, so they've told me that they are a pink unicorn flying to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I'm going, okay, all right, that's fine. I accept that you're a pink unicorn flying to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I'll say, do you want me to go with you? Let's, do you need anything? Maybe you need, I don't know, what do you need? Maybe I could ride you. Yeah, so let's ride the unicorn. Maybe we need what do you put on a horse? Yours. Saddle, there we go. Yeah, well, you need a saddle. We could get on the saddle, we can go off together and find the pot of gold, and who knows, maybe we could get some other friends with us on the way. It's going to be amazing. So I could do that, or on the other hand, I could do what's called blocking. So an example that Phelan gives is you could have someone turn up at a fictional door and say, hi honey, I'm home, and they go, you're not my husband, you're the doctor. I go, oh, okay, and it ends. And that's not a great situation. The idea is you can't actually tell a story, you can't tell a narrative unless you accept the offers that are given to you. If you start to block things, you block the story. So what you need to do to be able to improv, and this is important, is you need to pay attention to your fellow performers to make sure you are expanding upon what they have offered and not creating an environment that stymies creativity. Before we dive into some of this stuff, how about trying to create some of this environment in some of the collaborations that we see in our workplace? How often do we stymie creativity by blocking ideas and by shutting people down? Just think about that while we're doing some of these exercises. Okay, so there we go. Right, so everyone up on their feet to begin with. Sorry, yeah, it's so you are going to need to find a pair, ideally someone you don't know. And I'd like you to face each other, and I'd like you to stare romantically into each other's eyes. That's okay. Just smile at one another. Smile to begin with. There's an important psychological reason why you would smile at each other about opening up certain pathways. So, quiet. I know you've just met your life partners, so quiet now. What I'd like you to do is to start to mirror one another's actions. So holding your hands up in front of each other like this. Pretend you are a mirror and move very slowly and begin to copy one another's actions. The important thing is that you need to work out how to decide who is the follower and who is the leader. And I'd like you to work out a way of switching that control without, in theory, without anyone externally watching you, able to tell who's in control. And you can't speak in silence. So try and mirror each other's actions and try and work out a way of communicating to one another that you want to change control. So one of you is the mirror and one of you is the person. Try swapping those roles around while you're doing it. It's much easier if you're making eye contact while you're doing it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So before you sit down, could people just raise their hands if they felt that you had an intimate enough relationship with your partner that you were able to swap control without knowing it? Anyone? Could you come up to the front? Come up here. Thank you. All right. So what I'd like you to do is just to do the exercise again. Okay. And I'd like you to watch them and to see if you can guess. We're not going to ask to shout it out, but just try and swap over as many times as you feel you can, and we can try and work out and see who is in control. Just do it. Just consider it while you're watching. Yeah, really good. Wow. Oh, I think I spotted it. Oh. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so that is just a warm-up exercise, and it's one to try and get everyone involved. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Although I do like it as an exercise, while it doesn't have an inherent message related to Agile, I do find that it has a very interesting exercise with regards to how you communicate and how you actually collaborate together, because you have to collaborate quite closely with this person that you don't necessarily know. You haven't necessarily built trust up with this individual, but you need to work out a way of trying to communicate this change of control. So we're going to do another one. So this is my favorite exercise ever, and has this is one of those things that's an exercise that just keeps on giving. This one, it's beautiful. So what we're going to do is tell a story. So our story is going to start, I'm going to say, here. Am I in shot? Here. We're probably going to go left to right across the frame. So we're going to start here and end, well, let's say here. Okay. So what happens is that we get one volunteer to stand up and say a sentence which starts the story. Okay. And we get another volunteer to say the sentence, stood over here, that ends the story. Okay. Then people will stand up and come up to the front and fill in the gaps in any order they may well tell the story in, and they'll kind of fill it in. So the important things here is to listen to what people have said, and be open about the things that you're hearing people say. Every time a new person comes up, we're going to retell the story in the line, and we will keep going until we have something that kind of makes sense. I'll say that it doesn't necessarily make sense. Well, it will make sense in the universe that we all create here together. So what I'd like to do is, can we get a volunteer who wants to start the story? So this is the most terrifying part for all of us. But who has an idea for the beginning of a story? Yeah, let's go ahead. Just come straight up. Yeah. So just say your sentence as dramatically as you feel you can.
Once upon a time, a young girl lived in the woods.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, there we go. Always, yeah, and so you got the end. And how does this story end?
And they
I love a happy ending. So how are we going to kill them? I guess is the question. And who are they? I mean, we've got a plural here. So what happens here? So basically anyone can come up with anything. You can come up with a sentence that is anywhere within this timeline that we've now created. So any ideas? Yeah, go ahead.
Come up, yeah.
Yeah, come up. Right. Say your line and then we'll repeat the other stories.
Once upon a time, a young girl lived in the woods.
This young girl had a very interesting box with 3 very interesting tiny people that lived inside it.
Oh, this is intrigue. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, stay up. Yeah, you stay up. We need you all. Yeah, wherever you want to go. Well, it's up to you where you want to. Depending on where in the timeline you want to inject yourself. You're near the end. Okay, interesting. We're tackling it from both ends at the same time.
So we plan to kill people using big data.
Well, I've seen that happen before. So where is so all right? So now we have a little box with little people in it and a big data massacre. So how are we going to connect these two elements? Yeah, I already did that. It's all right. It's not mine. That's all. I'll stick that somewhere where I'm going to kick it over later. So anyone else? While we mop up the beer, ready for what sounds like a torrent of data? Go ahead.
And then Mr. Trump nationalised Facebook.
Oh! I'm starting to see how this one's shaping up. Although I feel the reverse order of the story. I'd like to know how the little people in the little box are there, or I have a feeling a political metaphor might be needed somewhere.
A small CSS change, sure.
yeah, that's all you need. So, any ideas? How are we going to connect the little people in the little box to Trump nationalising Facebook? Perhaps one or two. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Every night, the little people took their little laptop out and started playing on Facebook.
All right, so can we reread the line?
Once upon a time, a young girl lived in the woods.
This young girl had a very magical box with 3 very tiny people living in front of it.
And these little 3 people each had their own little laptop, and every night they took it out and they started playing on Facebook.
And then Mr. Trump nationalised Facebook.
So we plan to kill people using big data.
And in the end, they all died horribly.
Oh. So how are we going to? So everyone stay. So how are we going to? I think we still need. There's a connection needed here. There's not quite enough clarity for me on how Trump nationalising everyone. Did he say that? Did someone else say that? Who's they? We're going to kill people. We are going to kill people with big data. Any ideas? Anyone?
Oh.
Hey! It is traditional to cheer loudly, by the way, every time anyone comes up. Yeah, it's like, oh.
Because the North Koreans were influencing his dreams. They wanted to break that into metadata.
Right, let's reread the story. Let's see where we are.
Once upon a time, a young girl lived in the woods.
This young girl had a very magical box with 3 very tiny people.
And each night, these 3 young people, used to take their laptop out and play on Facebook.
And then Mr. Trump nationalised Facebook.
Because the North Koreans were influencing his dreams. And he wanted to understand that metadata. And this way we could plan to kill people using big data.
And in the end, they all died horribly.
Yeah, I think we have a story. That was quite it. Thank you very much. That was quite a sad ending. Tragically, it's obviously. I would say that was the most connected to actual reality. In all the times I've done this, that this one has been. Okay, so let's have a chat. So what made this exercise? Firstly, did people find this exercise engaging? Were you sort of engaged in the exercise? Yeah. It's not just me looking for good feedback there, by the way. It's a genuine question. Yeah. What do you think made that engaging? Why do you think it was interesting to see that? Any ideas? Why did you find it interesting?
Monkeys that like stories.
You're all monkeys that like stories. Okay, that's an interesting one. Yeah, so there is definitely that. We are telling a story, and that makes us automatically interesting with this idea. And there is definitely the sort of primordial inherent interest with storytelling. There's also a couple of other things that make this, because this isn't just a... Sorry, go on. Yeah.
The fundamental thing about keeping people engaged in a story, cliffhangers, uncertainty.
Yeah, so there is the storytelling aspect, but then remember this is a collaborative exercise that we're all involved in as well as a storytelling exercise. So we could all be sat down watching you could be watching a film, and you're engaged by that film because of the story that's being laid out in front of you, but you're passively involved in that situation. So the key things with this exercise that I believe is that it's actually safe for anyone to contribute ideas. So everybody can introduce ideas at any time. You can say whatever the hell you want, whether it's small people living in boxes or Trump. Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say I wouldn't really say without embarrassment. There was a slight embarrassment. That actually made it better. There's a slight awkwardness,
Yeah.
a bit of tension, which actually made it slightly
I
more
wouldn't
interesting.
necessarily. Okay, so yeah, I think that there is vulnerability when you stand up in front of people and you say the idea, even if it's a silly idea that there is still vulnerability there, but actually it was an environment that was safe to be vulnerable, and you're still going to feel there is definitely an element of discomfort with being vulnerable in any situation. There's an element of discomfort, and that's fine. It's about what's terrible is if you present yourself, if you put yourself in that potentially uncomfortable situation and you present an idea and you're shot down, then that is quite a negative cycle that can lead to a lot of challenges and definitely unsafety. So one of the key things in this exercise as well, and this is important, I think a really key thing is that everyone had the option, beyond, I'm not kind of dragging people up onto the stage and presenting them in front, presenting in front, or kind of calling out numbers and saying, number 10, your turn for an idea now. It doesn't, there's so much in that. It doesn't actually, people have autonomy. It's up to you whether or not you put yourself in that uncomfortable situation, and that's actually really important in creative teams as well. When you're presenting ideas, you don't ever want to be put on the spot for an idea. It doesn't really work. Most people's brains immediately don't work when you start to do that. Tell me how you're going to solve this problem. John, you've not said anything. That doesn't necessarily work very well. So you've got those situations, the autonomy. It's also safe to fail. Actually, there was a very good risk, and there is every time that I do this exercise, that it just is a terrible story and doesn't really go anywhere and it doesn't work. Interestingly, I find that when people are actually paying attention to their other performers, and they're listening and they're kind of growing the story together, and they're actually acting collaboratively as opposed to a group of individuals just chucking ideas out, which this exercise can be, and it has been, it's much less likely to fail. But actually it's also safe for that to happen. It's still fun, actually, regardless of if we just decided, all right, we can't do this, the story's not going anywhere, everyone is now stood up, no one else is sat down, we're going around the room, we can't work out how to do it. That would be quite funny in itself, I imagine. So the question at the bottom there is, would this work in your environment? So can you imagine having a situation or a meeting or a collaborative meeting? In fact, can you imagine in your careers a time where you were in a meeting or in a collaborative working situation with a group of people that was as engaging as this sort of an exercise, where everyone was safe to contribute? Has anyone got any memories of that? Yeah, normally a few people. Can you count those engagements? One hand? Two? Okay, there we go, exactly. I rarely, in the times when I think I've probably spoken to across multiple meetups about 700 odd people now in the last few months, and rarely do I get more than 3 or 4 hands up, and never has anyone said that it's more than a handful of times that they've actually experienced that, which is sorry.
It has to be a long meeting. It's always a slow start. I found.
What in those engaging meetings? Yeah, but then I tend to find that it's interesting because we're going to look a little bit into engagement at the end, but I tend to find that when things are engaging and when people are engaged in the task, especially when it's collaborative, you don't really notice the clock that much. Not in the same way. If it's a terrible meeting and it's boring and all you're doing is staring at Jdr on the board and the meeting is about doing something like updating Jdr tickets or something like that I'm sure at least half of us have been in one or two of those, and it's going on and on. You're looking at the clock every 10 seconds and you're very aware of time passing. When you're engaged on the task, on the other hand, you look at the clock and go, crap, an hour's gone by. This is fun. It's about as much as it gets. All right, so we're going to do one more exercise, and this is a bit more involved. So I'd like to get, could I get one volunteer up to begin with? One person to start with. There will be eventually 4 of you up here, and I'm going to grab some, were there any Post-it notes out before? There were Post-it notes here before. Can I steal some Post-it notes? Anyone volunteer? Yeah, sure, go ahead. All right, so I want to introduce this person. This is Alex, everyone. I don't know if this is your name, but you're Alex from now on. So Alex, as all of the people here are, we're thinking we should probably stand over here because I can see where the camera's pointing, and it might be annoying for people if we're just sort of like somewhere just off camera. So Alex works at a nuclear power station. If you didn't know, this building is actually a nuclear power station. Amazon, it was off cover. You know, you're now 10 hours into an 8-hour shift, and unfortunately you got a bit tired, sort of 9.5 hours or so, and you might possibly have knocked. I don't want to accuse you of anything because it could get, but you might possibly have knocked the big red Destroy Edinburgh button. And there's a bit of a timer going, and there's a bit of a situation right now. We might all be dead in a few minutes. So you're feeling kind of bad about that. Now I'm just going to tell you something privately, you know. So whenever in the exercise, whenever anyone said anything like buttons, red buttons, that's like trigger for you to be defensive. Okay. So can I have another volunteer, please? Who wants to go into the nuclear reactor that's about to go into meltdown?
He looks like a baby.
I'm being volunteered.
You're being volunteered. Oh, come on then.
Safety, right?
All right. This is Bailey.
Whether you like it or not.
So say hello to Bailey. This is Bailey. All right. So Bailey arrived. You're 2 hours late for your 8-hour shift.
Oh, right.
Well, you know. Yeah, so you're but you kind of got here, and this kind of the shit is on the fan, and being spread, and you're you're not that happy with Alex. You know, he might be ending your life. You've been up most of the night, which is why you were in late. Up most of the night with your sick child. You're exhausted, and you're kind of on kind of a short tether. But yeah, I'm just saying. So you're not particularly happy with Alex. So I'll just tell you something separately. If you hit anything relating to lateness, being in late, that's like trigger for you. Anger, defensiveness. All right. All right. Can I have another volunteer, please? Another volunteer? Anyone? It's a lot of fun. This really.
Because we're going to go down in 2 minutes doesn't mean you...
Yeah, you won't actually, I won't actually kill anyone, just to make that clear. All right, so this is Devon, everyone. Hello, Devon. Devon's the manager. And you just hate conflict. That's really your thing. You just hate conflict. You can't stand any kind of fighting or disagreement. So you're gonna. That's your kind of persona, really. That's what you. But you unfortunately also are stuck in the reactor with these people. And so in general, in order to really live that feeling, every time you hear any kind of conflict forming, disagreement, arguments, you're just trying to do anything you can to disperse it. Just whatever you can do, however disruptive that might be, just block it. Okay, so one more volunteer before we hit the big red button and lean up to doom. Any ideas? Anyone? Go on. It's a safe environment. Other than, well, yeah, I could just point to someone, but then I would be attacking their autonomy and negatively affecting. You were sort of just nudged. I don't know whether a peer volunteered you. I think that's safe. So any ideas? I had two people before. I saw you. You stood up at the same time. Would you like to come up? Yay! All right. So this is Perry. So Perry, you're actually the only person that knows anything about nuclear reactors. I don't know what these guys were even doing here. So you're the only person that knows. Unfortunately, you're not in there with them, so you can't do anything. They're stuck in the containment area, and you should probably stand here, I think, is probably a good spot. So there's a containment area. They're all stuck in there trying to work out how to fix this problem, although they don't really know what they're doing. So you're going to need to fix it. So I'm going to tell you the secret. So the secret is that there are 3 buttons on the wall, red, green, and blue. And they need to press all 3 at the same time to stop it. That's the only way. Okay. Yeah. All right, so before we begin, has anyone got a post-it note? Post-it notes? Just 3. Just 3.
Just 3, okay.
Yeah, I have them, but I realised they're right at the depth of my bag. I should have got them out before we started. All right, so on the wall, this button is blue. Yeah, this is going to mess with you. It's like one of those funny tests, isn't it? This button is red, and it's written in my handwriting as well, so the incongruence is going to be massive. Yep. And this button is green. All right. You'd have thought they would have more complicated controls in a nuclear power station, wouldn't you? But no, they just have 3 buttons, all of them. It's just like this. This is where most of the research for the talk was into nuclear power stations. Yeah, okay, so I would like you to begin. So it starts with, just to set the scene, you're in the nuclear power station. You guys have just arrived, and moments beforehand, Alex has unfortunately nudged the red button in a fit of exhaustive stupor. Might possibly have done. I mean, really, you don't know because you walked in and it happened afterwards. But you know, you might be a little bit suspectful. You know, he's the only one in there, really. You know, So let's go. Let's see what happens. There's an alarm going off. Something like that. That's what the noise is making. And
I had the most
I had the most horrible night ever.
didn't get any sleep, so if you don't mind, could you stay on duty for a bit longer so I can get it?
I can stay. There's no problem with that.
You're stuck. I mean, you are just saying you are stuck, and there is 2 minutes for you to live. So
What's that noise?
I'm just saying, like there is some urgency to this.
We got an issue, all right.
So maybe I think Perry, you might need to offer some assistance to them since they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, so you just there's like a radio here. Can you see it? Hello.
Please, push the buttons together.
Push
No, stop. Push the buttons in the same time, yes?
All 3 of the buttons at the same time?
Yeah, at the same time, yes.
Can we do that?
Yeah, please do it, but at the same time, yes.
You want me to push a button?
You're stupid, yes, but please, in the same time, yes. Just do it, yes, but quietly, yes. In the same time, yes. Blue, red, and green, yes, in the same time, yeah. 3, 2, 1, push!
Oh, well, all right. Congratulations, you actually solved this in the quickest amount of time than I've ever seen. The last group did actually die, sadly. So yeah, all right. Thank you very much. I'll.
Where did it go wrong?
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so all right, so I will. All right, so interestingly, this was the first time the group didn't immediately erupt in an all-out shouting match, which was you were unbelievably civil to one another considering the situation. Previous times the mere mention of the word button by Perry through the radio sent everyone into a free fall that eventually ended in their death. The last time we ran it, so let's have a little chat about why this. Yeah. Yes. So what do you think? What do you think happened? So these guys, they're stuck in a in a nuclear reactor, they obviously have their situations. They're in a situation that was potentially caused by one of them in the room. But actually, they just need to collaborate together on a task, a simple task to resolve the situation. What was blocking that? And in some cases, these guys weren't really blocked in the slightest. But what could block that? What could happen in those situations? So to give an example of how it happened previously, immediately you've got people going, whoa, buttons, whoa, I don't want to touch any buttons. I don't want to go near that thing. And other people going, I didn't touch it. It was Bailey's fault for being late. What, late? I wasn't late. For goodness sakes, I've been up all night with my kid. It's not my fault. And they start to get into, you hear these arguments and these cycles kind of forming. And then immediately you have Devon, the lifesaver, diving in to stop any potential discussion, often shutting down any conversations about lateness or buttons, for example, which is actually rather disruptive to solving the problem. So what can happen there? In this situation, you have blame, which can cause defensiveness and defensive behaviours. So who's been in a situation where you've seen defensive behaviours from an individual on a team? And what happens there is that most of the time that is an individual feeling unsafe and uncomfortable about a mistake that they've made. People make mistakes. This happens. This is, we're human beings, and whether those mistakes are being in late and because of something external or extrinsic to the team, or whether it's something directly related to the task, like a coding mistake or whatever else it could be, not adequately testing a feature, etc. There's a whole bunch of potential mistakes, an infinite number of potential mistakes. All of those things are likely to happen regardless of how experienced or otherwise you are in a particular thing, because you're more likely to make a mistake as a 20-year veteran of the software industry if you just happen to have been up all night, for example. And interestingly, people can often deal with those things, so people getting defensive around a situation, by trying to shut down that potential conflict. What happens is the defensiveness can become the elephant in the room that you don't really want to address. Because nobody wants to address the fact that, Mike is quite tetchy about the particular portion of the deployment code base that nobody wants to touch, because it was kind of his thing, and let's just let him do it. And he kind of gets a bit snippy every time someone talks about the build time taking 9 weeks, and maybe that's possibly slowing the deliverables slightly. But no one can talk about it. So it's important to have an environment, and what safety brings is an environment where people generally don't feel uncomfortable about making human mistakes, because people make mistakes and they know they're not going to be punished for those mistakes. Also, it's an environment where if conflict does arise, it can be dealt with and addressed directly, and not pushed down and not pushed down and not pushed down. Healthy conflict is absolutely key to the way that teams interact. And in fact, if anyone's ever worked in a team where there's surface agreement, the sorts of meetings where you kind of have people agreeing but not really agreeing, never. Oh, in Scotland, no, never. you just go. You just kill each other with big data. So. So the important part is that a safe team is actually not a team devoid of conflict. It's not a group that's actually that actually has no conflict. So,
does anyone teach conflict?
Pardon?
Does anyone teach conflict?
Teach conflict.
Suddenly occurred to me there's a
that's the next talk. So when you're safe, you can speak your truth, raise your concerns, and give and receive constructive feedback without humiliation, rejection, or punishment. So that's my extended definition of what safety is. So how do we get safety? Why do we need safety? How do we actually get it, or what's a practice we can use? Now, for those of you that have have looked at the Project Aristotle project, or if you Google it afterwards, Google's Project Aristotle, is that is that you'll see that they have a whole host of exercises. There's a whole host of individual exercises that you can work with teams, kind of small and large teams, from working with individual team members right up to leadership teams in organizations. They're all very positive, but I find that they are leaning towards a situation where it could get a little bit like, I want to be agile, so I'm going to use Scrum. I want to be agile, I'm now agile because I have a Kanban board, and that's me being agile. And actually, safety isn't just about performing a list of practices, doing a list of things, you know, there we go, the safety checklist, I've done all of those things, boom, we're safe, that's fine. So what do I think it is? So I think that paying attention is the first skill to safety. So what that means is me knowing and being mindful individually of how safe I feel. So that me knowing, oh, I'm in a situation where I feel unsafe, and being able to have a little internal conversation and say, why do I feel unsafe? Why do I feel like I can't contribute at the moment? Is it because a particular manager is in the room? Is it because of a particular dynamic? And just being able to be aware of that doesn't mean you necessarily do anything directly, just being aware of your own sensation of safety. Then you have extrinsic safety, so I call that experiential. Then you have extrinsic safety, so this refers to me now paying attention outwardly to the people that I collaborate with directly. So these are people on my team, the people that I collaborate with every day. And this is not just noticing how their behaviours might affect me, but also noticing how people and interactions between other team members might be affecting their levels of safety. Noticing that, it was interesting, Bob was very, very verbal and involved in the meeting at the beginning of that session, and then someone said something to him and then he didn't seem to be as involved anymore. Why was that? Why did he stop contributing at that point? And just being aware of it. The reason why awareness is important is because it doesn't matter how many practices and exercises that you put in place. If you're not actually aware of how safe or unsafe the team and people in your team are, then you wouldn't really know that you're making a change. You need to be able to, in retrospectives, the most important thing is to be able to visualize what the current situation is. You need to know where you are. And a lot of people don't know, actually. A lot of these things happen slightly beneath the surface of our general consciousness. So then you have environmental. So environmental safety is the organization. So this is the wider organization and everything in the organization, from leadership policies down to irritating things that you have to do, like filing timesheets or whatever the bureaucratic things might be, because all of those things can have an effect on how safe you feel or how engaged you feel in the work that you're doing. Now those things, unlike the extrinsic safety of being around your team, the environmental safety isn't something that you often have direct control over. This is going to be outside of your circle of influence directly. Might not be, might be in your control if you happen to be the CEO of an organization or in a senior leadership position. But for most people, this is going to be outside of that, but it will have an effect. It will have an inward effect. This can be reflected in things like blame cultures, for example, in organizations where there is quite a lot of, or a historical blame culture in an organization, where while there might not be directly anything in the team here that could be described as a blame culture or blaming behavior, you will see the team affected by that wider environmental unsafety. Okay. So what is this about? This is about creating an environment for success. This is a quote by Robert Henry. For those of you that have ever watched a talk by Woody Zull, he loves this quote, and as do I. So the object isn't to make art, it is to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. So what this means is if we can create a safe environment, and we can create an environment where people can safely collaborate and effectively collaborate, they will. Basically, and they will do a good job of it, because people inherently want to do a good job and they want to do good work.
What about the quote about Switzerland and Germany and 500 years of Switzerland, and all they created were cuckoo clocks and chocolate. In Germany they created tanks, war, all the things that Germany had created.
Sorry, I'm trying to maybe only.
So if you're in an area there's no conflict, and it's very safe. It's like Switzerland, yeah.
I'm not suggesting there would be no conflict in these teams. There would be lots of conflict in these teams if they're safe. But it's safe conflict. It's safe disagreement. People agreeing to disagree, people saying, let's try something. Oh, look, we've got a disagreement. That's an opportunity to do 2 experiments and see what works, as opposed to my way. So let's look at engagement quickly, because I know that we ran over and then we're running over a little bit again. So in the US, there is this study called the Gallup Survey, for those of you that have heard of Gallup. So Gallup do an annual, well actually it's daily, so this is from their daily poll, but they did do an annual international poll on employee engagement. And they found, rather shockingly, that 65% of the US workforce, this is taken from, but this number is roughly the same throughout kind of various different westernized regions, are disengaged or actively disengaged with their work. This actively disengaged portion, those people are not just kind of a bit unhappy with their work. They are like really pissed off and actively disengaging the engaged portion of that workforce. So in organizations where this is very high, you have a lot of challenges. I think people have worked in organizations like that. I certainly have. What I find interesting about engagement is this description. So engagement here, and there's a number of different descriptions of engagement, but engagement as Gallup define it is defined as having an opportunity to do what they do best each day, having someone at work who encourages their development and believing their opinions count. As a quick question, how much of that do you think is possible in an unsafe environment, in an environment with low levels of psychological safety? I personally, I don't see any of it being possible, really. I don't see me believing my opinions count. I wouldn't have any opinions in an unsafe environment. I wouldn't express myself in that way. I don't think I would risk doing the best in an organization if I thought my best might be criticized or I might be put down for that. Why would you present your best work in that circumstance? People often will very subconsciously hold back their best work in those situations. And having someone that encourages their development, well, I think it's pretty inferred that in many unsafe environments, they don't have the coaching and facilitative managers that maybe that people might benefit from. So there's another statistic that's equally depressing. Workplace stress. So 66% of the US workforce considers stress to be a somewhat or significant source, work to be a somewhat or significant source of stress for them. And stressed adults, 47% of them have lost patience with their spouse. 46% claim to have yelled at their kids. Just to put this into context, that number, that 66%, is roughly 98 million people in the US. So you're looking at roughly 50 million people who claim to be stressed and regularly potentially transferring that stress into their homes and affecting people that are not affected by the day-to-day effects of their work. This is really important because it actually shows that the unsafe environments that we're creating in our workforces are directly affecting the communities and the homes and the home lives of individuals. This is a lot bigger than just improving safety to improve our economic outcomes, and the financial success of organizations. Sure, you get that for free, but this is much more involved. So I'm going to very quickly go through the Jdr model, because what I haven't done is show that there is actually a scientifically proven relationship between engagement and workplace stress. So the Jdr model, produced by originally I think it was a work by Arnold Backer or one of his collaborators in the originally produced. He certainly is the most outspoken voice in that space now. And he describes work as being all work can be grouped into, or stress at work can be grouped into, job demands and job resources. So demands are things that are pretty static to the role. So for example, if you're a bricklayer, you're going to have high physical demands. Now that's unrelated to anything else that might be as part of that job. You could have a terrible manager, you could have no friends, you could be no one's really collaborating with you. All of that stuff could be true as well. But actually the demands on the work, that's just the work. That's the work that you're doing, and it presents certain demands that are fixed. Emotional demands could be, for example, working as a nurse in a hospice, where you are really having to give a lot of yourself on a daily basis emotionally. And that, again, isn't going to get better as a result of anything else. The initial, I'm working with people that are, that are terminally ill, is going to be emotionally fraught for anyone. And again, mental demands is going to be working, hopefully, as a software engineer or something equally challenging. Then you have job resources. So resources are the positive things that they bring. So for example, being given autonomy to decide the direction of your work, being given regular feedback for the work that you're doing, adequate social support. So that's just good peers, good teamwork and good collaboration, high levels of trust in the team. And good coaching relationships. Again, that's a really critical part that comes up in a number of things, that positive facilitative leadership and coaching style management is really important. Now, what happens is job resources lead to an increasement in engagement. Okay, we've already covered engagement. Job demands increase workplace stress. But what's really interesting are these lines here. And what that shows is that job resources and the positive aspects of that work directly decrease the effects of job demands on job demands ability to increase levels of workplace stress. When you have high levels of engagement, that also decreases the effect of workplace stress on individuals, as does workplace stress, obviously, directly affects engagement. And those things lead to positive or negative personal and organizational outcomes. Organizational outcomes being money, generally. Personal outcomes being not being depressed and not burning out. Not shouting at your kids. So what is really important with this is this relationship here. So I described this with a little analogy. If you can remember a time when you were working late, and you were late because you needed to get some deliverable to a manager of some kind who you knew would be highly dissatisfied. Maybe that deadline wasn't a real deadline. You knew that manager was just pandering to some other manager, some other important person. Maybe the CEO was visiting from another country and they wanted to do some stupid presentation, and the project you're working on was nowhere near ready for that work. And still you're up at 2 o'clock in the morning, working late, trying to deliver something with smoke and mirrors that makes it look like the team is further along what they are, so your manager doesn't get shouted at. How do you feel at 2 a.m. when you eventually finish that work and it sort of is there, the quality's a bit crappy? You feel engaged and happy? Did you feel engaged and happy at sort of midnight, 2 hours to go? Maybe no. So what about another time when you're just working in the evening, you sit down to work, you're enjoying the project, you know that you've got, maybe there is a deadline for the following day, but you're kind of engaged with it, and you look up at the clock and, oh God, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Do you feel knackered? Probably. You're probably tired. Oh God, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. But you might actually be still kind of buzzing. You're still engaged in what you're doing. You've still got stuff going around in your head, all of those ideas. You might not sleep well just because you're still excited about the work that you've just done. But you definitely don't feel the effects of this. Because you had high levels of this. And that's a really, really important element to remember, is that engagement directly affects our perception and our resilience to workplace stress. So then to go back to this statistic and this, just to point out, 65% of the US workforce claim to be disengaged. 66% claim to be consider work to be a significant source of stress for them, or somewhat as significant. Statistical correlation, there's a lot of potential problems there, but I think there's a potential link, or at least I think that if we can increase levels of safety, that perhaps, it's completely the wrong slide, then perhaps the levels of workplace stress may well go down in organisations, because we would have better organisations that actually pay attention to the health and the mental health of their individuals. Okay, so to finish, safety is the #1 indicator of an effective team. There is no other way, there is no better way for a team to demonstrate its effectiveness than to focus on safety. If you don't have safety, then you do not have any of the other elements of an effective team. Any of the other things, you won't have impact, you won't be doing those things. You might do to some degree, you know, obviously, you know, those of you that have looked at the history, the history of management will have heard of Taylor. It's definitely possible to punish someone in a factory situation, for example, and to get them to deliver outcomes under pressure, under the traditional carrot and stick command and control method of management. You can get people to do things, there is no question, okay? That works, you can definitely do it. Will they be really effective? No, they won't really be effective. Will they be often doing stuff but not doing the right stuff? Yes, a lot of the time. So I'm going to end on a quote from Arlo Belshi. Safety is a very profound thing. Not being emotionally abusive in the workplace sure would make the world a different place. Thank you very much.